I recorded terrifying tales from a haunted trail guide, and what I discovered is unbelievable. I never should have opened that door. It still haunts me. The day started out normal: overcast skies, the faint smell of wet leaves from the rain the night before. I was excited to explore the notorious haunted trail that my friends buzzed about all week. Supposedly, it was filled with ghostly encounters and unseen whispers that would make your skin crawl. I figured it would be a fun thrill, nothing more. But then, I stepped into the darkness. The first thing I noticed was the chill. It wrapped around me like a thick, wet blanket. I could hear the soft rustling of leaves, but it wasn't the wind. I sensed something else, something darker. A whisper, maybe. My heart raced as I ventured deeper into the woods. Shadows danced around me, moving in unnatural ways. I peered into the gloom, searching, hoping for something tangible. Instead, all I found was silence. Suddenly, a twig snapped behind me. I froze. My breath quickened. Panic surged through my veins. I turned, expecting to see one of my friends playing a prank, but there was nothing. Just an empty path lined with gnarled trees. A cold sweat trickled down my back. Something was wrong. I pressed on. With each step, the unease grew. There were stories of a forgotten graveyard nearby, where spirits supposedly roamed free. The idea had intrigued me, but now it felt like a curse. The night deepened, and I swear the air grew heavier. The oppressive darkness wasn't the only thing weighing down on me. An unseen presence loomed. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see a figure emerging from the shadows. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of movement. My heart dropped. I whipped around, but again, nothing. Yet the weight in the air intensified. The whispers grew louder, sounding almost like voices. I strained to listen, but they faded into dissonant murmurs that I remembered the tales about a lost soul that had wandered the trail, eternally searching for something it could never find. What if? My stomach twisted with dread. I turned to leave, but the path seemed to stretch endlessly. Panic clawed at my insides. I could feel eyes watching me, the chill creeping closer, and then it happened. A loud crash echoed through the trees. My heart thundered in my chest. The noise came from behind me, a cacophony that shattered the eerie silence. I spun around to look, but the last thing I saw was a figure emerging from the shadows before everything went black. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I awoke gasping, the air thick and bitter in my lungs. My heart pounded against my ribcage as I blinked into the darkness. For a moment, I believed I was still within the confines of the forest, lost among the twisting trees, but reality slowly seeped back in. I lay on something damp and cold moss. My fingers trembled as I felt around and realized I was prone on the forest floor, the dampness seeping into my clothes. Instinctively, I pushed myself up, the chill biting into my skin. But where was the trail? There was no sensible path beneath my feet, just tangled roots and sprawling shadows. Instantly, flashes of fear filled my mind. The figure. The crash. Had it whisked me away into some hidden realm of the woods, where time bent and twisted like the branches overhead? I tried to steady my breath. I had to find my way back. That I forced myself to stand, but it felt like I was swimming against the current. The shadows gathered thicker around me, swirling with an almost tangible life of their own. Each snap of a twig echoed in the stillness, each rustle of leaves set my nerves on fire. Whatever was out there felt like it was more than just a lurking shadow, it had substance, intent. As I stepped cautiously, careful not to trip, the whispers returned, threading through the air a song of sorrow and despair. Help me. The plea twisted into a croak, reverberating against the trees. It sent chills racing down my spine, and against every instinct, I moved toward the sound, drawn like a moth to a flame. My feet crunched softly on the fallen leaves, every step a reminder that I was not alone. Suddenly, I stumbled upon a clearing bathed in faint moonlight, revealing an ancient graveyard. Worn headstones were scattered like fallen sentinels, their inscriptions barely legible beneath years of moss and lichen. A shiver crept through my body, and the air turned frigid, my breath fogging in front of me. Here lay the lost souls, restless and searching, and I felt their anguish seep deep into my bones. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me, suffocating in their desperation. Find us, find her, they beckoned in a haunting chorus. But as I tried to decipher the words, a scratching noise emerged from behind one of the tombstones. My heart raced. What could possibly be hiding there? I stepped closer, drawn closer by a mysterious force. My hands trembled as I brushed away damp leaves, uncovering a tarnished locket. I held it up to the light, a flicker of hope igniting within me. Could this be the key to their release? But as I turned it over in my palm, the whispers crescendoed into a frenzy. No. No. Don't. Before I could react, the ground beneath me trembled violently, the whispers morphing into agonized screams. Shadows erupted from the earth, swirling upwards like smoke, their forms shifting and writhing with pain and madness. My eyes widened, and a scream caught in my throat as I stumbled back, the locket slipping from my grasp and clattering against the stones, and then it happened. A figure erupted from the ground, a twisted amalgamation of faces crying out, reaching for me with spectral hands. Their eyes, empty and filled with torment, locked onto mine. I could feel their cold fingers brush past me as I turned to run, my heart thundering in desperation, but the shadows followed, snaking around my ankles, tugging me back into their world of despair. I could hear the echoes of countless voices crying my name, pleading for salvation, but all I could think about was escape. As the night engulfed me once more, I ran blindly into the darkened woods, the weight of their grief trailing behind me like a dark promise, and then, just as I thought I had gained distance, an unseen hand seized my shoulder and yanked me back. I twisted to confront my captor, expecting the worst, expecting a face twisted in rage, but there was only darkness. My screams were silenced as everything faded to black once more. When I came to again, I was lying on what felt like a hard surface, no longer overwhelmed by a suffocating darkness. I blinked, my vision slowly clearing as I began to take in my surroundings. I was in a small, dimly lit cabin. Old wooden beams stretched above me, dust motes dancing precariously in the fading light. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and something acrid that tingled in my nose. My heart raced, pulse drumming in my ears. This was not where I had intended to be. With trepidation, I pushed myself against the wall to stand. The cabin creaked around me, as if acknowledging my presence with reluctant familiarity. Sketchy memories flickered through my mind, the graveyard, the anguished spirits, the darkness swallowing me whole. I felt their gaze even hear a heavy weight upon my shoulders, the inexplicable urge to flee rising like bile in my throat. From the corner of the room, shadows seemed to drift just beyond the reach of the feeble light that buzzed above me. But the light was dimming, pulsing irregularly, throwing grotesque shapes along the walls. My breath caught in my throat, anticipating whatever gestalt of terror lurked just out of sight. I took a hesitant step forward, the floorboards creaking beneath me. "Hello." I called out, my voice trembling, but it came out as an uncertain whisper. The response was silence, thick and suffocating, save for an echo of scratching that crept from behind a door on the far wall. It sounded alive, a raw, frantic sound, alternating between a tap and a scrabble, clawing against the wood as if something or someone was trying to escape. Compelled by an instinct I couldn't understand, I approached the door, trembling with fear yet unable to stop. The scratching grew frantic as I neared, punctuated by a desperate gasp. "Help me." The plea was familiar, echoing the haunting chorus that permeated the graveyard. My heart sank as I reached for the doorknob, a flimsy barrier between me and whatever horror lay beyond. Suddenly, the whispers returned, cascading like a tide, urging me to turn back. Leave. It's not safe. Find her. They clamored, each voice layering on top of the last, creating a cacophony that bore into my mind. But before I could draw back, the door swung open, revealing a dark, narrow staircase that spiraled downward into an abyss of shadows that in the fleeting light, I could make out the vague outline of a figure at the bottom, swaying back and forth, their features shrouded in darkness. The only thing that stood out was a glimmering locket, identical to the one I had dropped in the graveyard, hanging from their neck, a spectral pendant that seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of the very house itself. Help me. The voice repeated, now a pained whisper that echoed in my chest. Driven by a mix of dread and a forbidding sense of purpose, I took a step forward, my feet guiding me closer to the staircase. But as my foot descended onto the first step, the temperature plummeted, and icy fingers gripped my heart with a fervor that stole my breath. Suddenly, a cacophony erupted behind me, the door slamming shut with violence, sealing me in the darkness. I whirled around to slam a fist against the door, desperate to escape the encroaching shadows. But there was nothing but silence now, a heavy blanket that stifled my cries. In the dim light ahead, the figure at the base of the stairs stopped swaying as if they had sensed my hesitation, turning slowly toward me. I couldn't discern their features, but as they stepped into the light, I saw the terrible truth. Their face was marred by decay, skin stretched taut over an inhuman visage. The locket swung wildly around their neck, no longer a beacon of hope but a sickening emblem of despair. No. No. It wasn't me. I cried out, but the figure drew nearer, the stench of decay wafting toward me in waves. Help, it rasped, reaching out with skeletal fingers, inching ever closer, the darkness behind them swirling like a storm, and I felt the ground beneath me begin to tremble again. Every instinct screamed for me to turn and flee, but as I stood trembling, the figure's mouth opened wider, releasing a chilling wail, freezing me in place. Suddenly, it lunged toward me, and the darkness consumed everything that as the last glimmer of light faded, I was left with only an echo, find her, find us. And then came the whispers once more, a laughter that rippled through the air like venom, carrying with it a promise of revelation intertwined with horror. I gasped as the shadows receded, revealing another part of the cabin I hadn't noticed before. It was an old, wooden table, and scattered atop it were weather-beaten journals, their yellowed pages splayed open as if someone had been urgently trying to document a history long buried. But the true horror pulled at me then, not the spectral figure, nor the horror that had almost consumed me in the darkness, but the realization that the air had shifted. It carried a sense of urgency, a potent mix of dread and despair. That I picked up one of the journals, the spine cracked and fragile, and instantly felt a surge of unease as I began to read. The entries were scrawled hastily, the ink running in places, as if written in an overwhelming panic. That it feeds on fear, one entry claimed. The shadows are its eyes, watching and waiting, beckoning the weak to join its eternal night. A chill coursed through me, and I could almost hear those very whispers swirling in the corners of the room, lulled by the words on the page. I flipped through more of the entries, each recounting stories of those who had entered this cursed cabin and never returned. The last entry was dated just a week prior, written in a frenzied hand. It has come for me. I can hear it in the walls, in the floor. Each night, it grows stronger. A sudden thud resonated deep within the cabin, prompting me to snap the journal shut. It was then that I noticed a sizable crack in the wall, shimmering with a dark energy, pulsating as if it held a storm behind it. I was drawn to it, though every instinct screamed for me to step away, but deeper curiosity clawed at my being. I stepped closer, entranced by the way the shadows coiled around the crevice, as if they were alive, writhing with a hypnotic rhythm. I reached out, my fingertips brushing against the rough surface, and at that moment, the world around me shifted again. The air grew denser, the light flickered out entirely, plunging me into a void where only the crack's ominous pulse remained. Find her, find us echoed in my mind, more urgent now, wrapping tighter around my consciousness like a noose. I sensed lingering figures emerging from the darkness, their whispers rising in a desperate crescendo. Help us! They begged in unison, voices layered and cold, a cacophony of pleas that drowned out my own racing thoughts. Stricken, I stumbled back, only for the floor to give way slightly beneath me, collapsing under an unseen weight. The crack had widened, and with it came a moan deep, bone-chilling, crawling from the depths of despair. I turned to flee, but the door that had sealed me in suddenly flew open, and a gust of wind wound itself around my body, pushing me forward toward the darkened abyss. Overcome with panic, I wrenched myself free and bolted toward the door. Yet as I crossed the threshold, I found myself tumbling into a place I didn't recognize. I was now outside, the frigid air biting at my skin, but the ground beneath me felt wrong, as if it formed a living entity that pulsed unnaturally with each step I took. The trees around me twisted and loomed, their gnarled branches clawing at my shoulders, blocking any escape. "Help me. Please." The voice returned soft, sweet, imbued with pain. I spun around to face the dark forest, heart pounding as I stumbled further from the cabin and deeper into the suffocating night. "Find her." The echoes urged, sharper now, almost tangible, as if tethering me back to the darkness I was trying to escape. Glancing back over my shoulder, I saw the figure that had once haunted me, now standing at the cabin's door, the locket gleaming under the moonlight, a sinister star illuminating the beginning of my descent into madness. Driven by fear, I took off running, searching for a path, any path, yet the shadows thickened around me, converging like a twisted web closing in on its prey. The voice warned of unspeakable things lurking nearby, an electric tension crackling through the air. I felt eyes upon me, countless gazes concentrated in the dark, and I knew they were watching. "Turn back," it whispered. And with that, I stumbled upon an unnatural clearing, where the moonlight broke through the canopy, illuminating a grotesque sight, an altar of crooked bones piled high against the base of a massive, ancient tree. Each twist and turn of the structure felt alive, pulsing with the energy I could not comprehend, and in the center was a small, flickering flame, the beckoning heart of a sinister ritual. Above me, the sky twisted with sinister clouds, dark and swirling, as the whispers rose to a fever pitch. "You've come to us. You'll join us." The ground rumbled, shaking violently beneath me, roots of the colossal tree reaching out for my legs. I had but seconds to move, to escape, to sever this connection to whatever madness lay at the edge of the woods. But just as I turned to flee, I felt a cold, clammy hand gripping my ankle, yanking me backward, pulling me toward the altar. I screamed, struggling, but the forest roared with laughter as if it reveled in my terror. The whispers crescendoed, a symphony of despair, closing in on my heart as the flames flickered dangerously, and in that moment, I realized my flight had merely begun. The grip around my ankle tightened, pulling me closer to the altar, the bone structure looming before me like a grotesque invitation. The laughter rose to a euphoric chime, wrapping around my thoughts, enveloping them in dread. In those twisted instants, I felt the essence of the forest coursing through my veins, urging me to surrender to its caress. I gasped, and my breath filled with the rot and decay that oozed from every crevice of the altar. "Help us. Help her." The cries echoed, a haunting ring that sliced through the darkness, igniting an instinctual fight within me. My other foot planted against the earth, and with a desperate lunge, I pulled free from the unrelenting grasp. The cold fingers released me with a final, bone-chilling brush, and I stumbled backward, my heart racing like a trapped animal. But there was no reprieve for me. The branches around the clearing quivered eagerly, drawing nearer, threatening to ensnare me again. I turned to run back into the thicket, but the trees themselves warped and shifted, bending into crude silhouettes that blocked any semblance of an escape. I was trapped in this terrifying labyrinth, the altar still pulsating in my periphery, whispering promises of freedom that were anything but. Then, among the cacophony of pleas and laughter, a different voice emerged, slippery and deceptive, curling around my mind. "Join us, we only wish to free you. Embrace your destiny." It was the voice of the spectral figure, twisting and contorting into something both comforting and horrifying. I could feel the pull, almost magnetic, towards the flames flickering on the altar, teasing my consciousness with visions of love, acceptance, and dark desires. No. Not again. I screamed to the encroaching shadows. In one last act of defiance, I turned and sprinted into the depths of the woods, branches clawing at my clothes, their rough bark tearing at my skin. My heart raced, pounding in my ears with every shuddering step. The earth throbbed beneath me, a heart of its own, quickening as if it thrived on my terror. Then I saw her. Just ahead, standing among the twisted trunks, was a girl with hollow eyes and hair cascading like ink. She bore the same locket as the figure from the cabin, the same eerie glow spilling a nauseating light into the darkness. Her mouth was agape in a silent scream, eyes pleading yet forlorn. "Help me," she whispered, her breath ghosting through the air like a dying ember. "You must find it, you must save us. Who are you?" My voice trembled, brittle with fear. But she only pointed behind me, toward the altar. A sudden wave of energy crashed into me, the shadows elongating and twisting into formidable shapes, writhing against the earth. They screeched as they lunged forward, their ghastly forms bending nature to their will, striving to seize me. "Run," she urged, stepping closer with every breath she took. A flicker of recognition shot through Mesh was one of them, part of the altar's fabric, a prisoner of the dark magic that strove to claim me as well, but my instincts warned me against staying too close to her. I had no choice but to move, and as I bolted past her, a deafening roar erupted from the forest, shaking the very ground I ran upon. The branches swiped at my back, and I could feel the weights of the shadows clawing at my sanity. Instinctively, I leaped over exposed roots and errant stones, wrenching every thought of the girl from my mind. I would not become one of the lost souls tied to that grotesque altar, trapped forever in the grasp of darkness they served. Yet the forest was alive, the laughter died and the whispers turned to a bone-chilling chant, echoing through the trees. "You can't escape. You belong to us." Heart surging, I burst into another clearing, sunlight flickering through the canopy, awakening hope, but as I ran, the landscape shifted again. Instead of leading me to safety, it revealed a tight circle of naked trees, their trunks intertwined like shackles, closing me off from the outside world. The voice returned, clearer now, "Join us." And I shuddered, the specter of the girl reappearing before me, only now her eyes glowed with a ghastly light, a hunger for souls burning deep within. I spun, searching for a route to escape, but with each passing second, the night thickened, compressing around me like an impenetrable shroud. "Help me," she cried again, and this time, the despair in her voice cleaved my heart. As the shadows encroached, I was left with a paralyzing choice: save myself or plunge into the harrowing depths of her torment. "Find us," the woods beckoned. And finally, the horrifying truth dawned on me: some destinies are meant to be fulfilled, even if the cost is everything. I stumbled backward, the oppressive darkness swirling around me as a deep sense of hopelessness settled in my chest. The girl stood there, the visage of agony etched onto her once innocent face, now twisted into a sculpt of despair, pleading for help that felt as distant as the sun. The whispers intensified, a symphony of tortured souls weaving through the air, their mournful wails clawing at my conscience. "Find us," they urged in unison, their voices a chilling reminder of the fate that awaited anyone foolish enough to linger here. The trees, resolute and sentient, pulsed with a dreadful energy, undulating like a collective heartbeat, their branches weaving tighter, encircling me in a claustrophobic embrace. No. I screamed, panic igniting a raw instinct within me. I turned to the glimmer of light, the locket's glow beckoning like a siren in the void. There was a thread of clarity in that wretched familiarity. I had to uncover its origin. Perhaps it held the key to breaking this abhorrent cycle. I bolted towards it again, heart pounding, driven by something greater than fear. The girl raised her hand, shadows racing from the edges of her silhouette, almost as if she were trying to warn me. "You don't understand. You're not meant to," but her voice was drowned out as I propelled myself forward, limbs heavy with lethargy and dread. As I reached the altar, the air shimmered as if reality itself cracked at its seams. The bone structure loomed over me, an altar of desperate offerings and dark desires. I crouched, breathless, the ground slick with a viscous black ooze that seemed to slither over my shoes, trying to drag me into its insatiable depths. That I brushed my fingers against the cool metal of the locket, trying to fathom its significance. As I touched it, a fresh wave of suffering surged through me, visions flooding my mind, friends lost in the woods, their laughter turning to screams, their faces blurring amid throngs of twisted, lurking shadows. Each scene felt painfully real, embedding itself within my psyche, a truth darker than night shrouding me. No. Stop! I cried, wrenching my hand away only to find it stained with ink-black ichor from the altar that now pulsated with an angry, fiery hue. The laughter I thought I had silenced spilled back into the clearing, the voices blending into a violent crescendo that ignited the air with reaction. "Join us!" they shrieked, a well of maddening glee that clawed at my sanity. That I gritted my teeth, fighting against the oppressive wave, knowing I couldn't succumb to their calls. But the restlessness churned within, an unanticipated thrill intermingling with sheer terror. In that instant, I could hear her voice again, softer now yet full of despair. "It's all a trap, you can't trust them." As the shadows writhed closer, I wrestled with the weight of her words, the conflict gnawing at my mind. Shouts echoed in the distancia, chorus of danger, a warning echoing from beyond the trees. But just as I thought I could escape their grasp, the girl surged forward, her hand brushing against the locket but pulling away just before skin met metal. "You must," she gasped, her voice saturating the air with urgency. But before she could finish, the shadows clamped down around her, tendrils of darkness that latched onto her wrists, dragging her backward into an abyss that gleamed hungrily. "No!" I screamed, lunging forward in desperation, but an icy tendril shot out from the shadows, coiling around my ankle, yanking me away from her. The world spun violently as I fought against the grasping darkness, the chanting closing in around me. "You are part of us now. Free yourself, find your true self." I was thrown into a mindless frenzy, energy surged through my veins, liberating me from fear, feeding off my growing rage. I spun back to the altar, ripping the locket from its grip. In that fraction of a moment, surging with power, madness breaking the surface, time halted. The contours of the altar splintered, revealing faces twisted in agony, remnants of those who had come before me, their hands grasping toward me, mouths wide and voiceless. Screams, "Help us!" they cried, echoing through the depths of darkness. Suddenly, a blinding light erupted from the locket, illuminating the forest and revealing the mass of wailing shadows that transformed into ghastly figures, their hollow eyes fixated upon me, enraptured by my newfound power. In a moment of clarity, I recognized them, a legion of lost souls bound to the forest's evil, imprisoned by their own choices, and now converging upon me, their collective sorrow resonating in my very bones. "Embrace your destiny!" they shrieked, and amid the chaos, deep fear coursed through me, threatening to consume every thread of bravery I had. And just as I prepared to confront the encroaching horrors, a screeching roar erupted from the depths of the tree-line, shaking the very ground beneath my feet. The forest trembled as chaos reigned, and I was suddenly plunged into darkness, the locket slipping from my grasp, rolling away into the unknown. That I was all that remained, suspended in horrific anticipation, the shadows tightening their hold around me as the beast emerged, a shape more terrible than any nightmare I dared imagine. As the malicious eyes locked onto mine, I realized the truth. This was a being of the woods, the darkness given form, ready to claim me as its own. In that heartbeat, the forest held its breath, whispering one final, malevolent warning: "This is just the beginning." The air thickened around me, an oily mist curling through the trees as the creature stepped into the clearing, its form stretching and twisting unnaturally, a grotesque marionette dancing on the strings of malevolence. Its skin glistened like beetle shells, shifting hues of black and green, matching the seeping shadows that enveloped every inch of the forest. It had ice-snow, voids where features should have been, silently gaping with an insatiable hunger, fixed directly upon my soul. Every instinct within me screamed to flee, yet I was paralyzed, trapped not only by fear but by an overwhelming sense of impending doom. This was not just a creature but a manifestation of all the anguish and despair that thrived within the woods, a creature born from the very whispers that had drawn me here. "Join us," it whispered, each syllable laced with promises of power, temptation as intoxicating as it was horrifying. "Stay back!" I shouted, my voice wavering, strangled by the clutches of dread that tightened around my throat. But the shadows, sensing my wavering resolve, surged forward, merging into tendrils of darkness that caressed my skin, chilling me to the bone. I felt the locket's absence, its warmth now a distant memory, replaced with a void that threatened to consume me whole. With every passing moment, the heart of the forest drummed with a sinister rhythm as the beast advanced, the ground quaking under its weight. Its voice, a twisted melody of all the lost souls, echoed like a funeral dirge, "You are one of us now. You cannot escape your fate." I glanced around frantically, searching for anything that could aid my escape, but the trees had bloomed closer, limbs creaking and groaning, ready to ensnare me entirely. The whispers filled my ears, rising to a maddening climax as they urged both madness and salvation. "Fight! Fight! Fight!" They chanted, igniting embers of defiance within me, pulling me toward a sliver of hope buried deep beneath the walls of despair. The creature stopped mere feet from me, its presence overwhelming, its breath acrid and fetid, and intoxicating miasma that threatened to cloud my thoughts. With a sudden, chaotic surge of adrenaline, I bolted to my left, weaving through the maze of twisted limbs, feeling the darkness claw at my back. The sounds of my heart thudded in my ears, a frantic drumbeat racing against the wretched wails that clung to the air. As I stumbled deeper into the thicket, I caught sight of the locket, glimmering like a star fallen from the heavens, embedded in the blackened earth. I dove for it, fingers scrambling against the cold ground, skin grazing against something slick and hard, not the locket, but a broken bone, suddenly bringing me back to grim reality. The forest was not just haunted, it was a graveyard, and I was not the first to lose my way. No, I gasped as the horrific realization settled in my bones. I mustn't, but the ground beneath me trembled violently, shaking with a deep, resonating growl that churned deep within the stomach of the forest. I felt the air thicken, the very essence of the shadows coiling tighter, as if the trees themselves were starving for more souls. Desperation surged through me. Grasping the locket, I invoked the flickering memory of its light, praying for any spark of resistance against the encroaching darkness. Suddenly, the forest filled with a deafening cacophony as the beast lunged. Its monstrous maw opened wide, a maw dripping with shadows and swarming insects, the eyes pulling me in with a magnetic force that screamed of all-consuming dread. The creature's roar enveloped me, leaving no room for thought. It was a symphony of all the lost, echoed back through to me a chilling reminder of my fate. No. I bellowed, throwing the locket behind me, praying it would spark some miracle in the dark. As it hit the ground, a blinding light erupted, cascading through the shadows, catching the creature off guard, blinding it for a split second. I seized the moment, sprinting like a madman towards the faint echoes of laughter that now mingled with shrieks, bewildered yet hopeful that my friends might still be there. But as I tore through the thick underbrush, the laughter morphed into a menacing chorus, echoing warnings tinged with malice. "Leave before it's too late," they hissed, the shadows stalking hungrily behind, a sinister promise of despair. With every ounce of strength and will I could muster, I leapt over the final boundary of twisted roots and branches, crashing into a small clearing. Just as I dared to glance back, the creature broke through, its mass navigating the foliage with grotesque grace, the ground trembling with its approach, and just beyond, entrapped by the tendrils, I saw them, the lost souls, faces indistinguishable in their agony, reaching out toward me. "Help us," they wailed in unison, imploring, despair cascading through my veins like poison. With nowhere to run, the echoes grew louder, blending into an overwhelming cacophony that reverberated through the night. Above me, shadows swirled into a cyclone of torment, and as the creature lunged again, its fangs bared, I felt the last remnants of my courage shatter. In that split second, as reality crumbled and darkness enveloped me, I understood there was no escaping this nightmare. The whispers crescendoed into terrifying clarity, "Welcome home." And then everything went black. The void swallowed me whole, a thick, suffocating silence where even the pounding of my heart seemed to dim, leaving only an unsettling emptiness. For what felt like an eternity, I floated in darkness, unanchored and weightless, anxieties morphing into visions of twisted spectres of those once lost in this accursed forest, their forms roiling in pain and pleading in a language unrecognizable. Then, a rupture surged through my consciousness, bright and raw, as if I were being torn from stasis. I gasped, pulling in foul air, the scent of decay swirling around me. Yet, the agony of fear was dulled. I felt different. My eyes flickered open to find myself back within the embrace of the monstrous woodlands, though now, the colors were warped. The trees towered higher, their sinewy limbs twisted into grotesque shapes that reached down like claws, desperate for flesh. That I staggered to my feet, fear clawing anew at my throat. The chilling air hummed with energy, heavy with the weight of otherworldly forces. As I tried to regain my bearings, the whispers returned, more insistent now, thrumming through my veins like a pulsing heartbeat. "Join us." You remember, I gritted my teeth, shaking my head. "No, I'm not one of you." My voice echoed, hollow against the encroaching darkness. Yet as I spoke, waves of melancholic familiarity flooded my mind, each phrase laced with longing. I stumbled, feeling the pull of the abyss, my legs betraying me as they carried me deeper into the shadowy maze. Glancing around, I noticed a flicker in the shadows, something beyond the tree's tumbling pattern, a dance of warped figures flickering in and out of focus. My heart raced as the laughter erupted again, a maddening chorus that clawed at the walls of my sanity. "You can't resist, you're already ours." Their mirth twisted into sinister shrieks. With raw desperation, I pressed forward, each step dragging me closer to whatever sinister revelry awaited. In the shadows, I began to discern faces, familiar yet twisted grotesquely by despair and rage, their eyes sunken, gaunt. The very forest itself vibrated with malicious intent as they beckoned, arms stretching toward me, fingers splayed like crooked branches. "Help us, save us, take freedom." They cried, their pleas layered with desperation. Yet as I listened, I caught glimpses of how they suffered, shadows of their pasts blending with mine, memories of joy turned to ash, friendships forged in sorrow. I tore my gaze away, swallowing the surge of anguish bubbling up. "Get away!" I screamed, but my words were eclipsed by a rising melody from deeper within the thicket, an ethereal voice filtering through the madness, both beckoning and repelling. It warned of horrible truths lurking beneath the surface, as if the forest itself were a sentient being, sharing secrets that quenched my thirst for understanding but ultimately churned my stomach. And no more. I won't be a part of this. While I shouted, the ground beneath me vibrated, a low rumble echoing that made the very trees tremble, and suddenly the laughter stopped. The abrupt silence felt more ominous than the earlier chaos, as if the woods held its breath. Then I heard it, soft at first, then insistent, a rhythmic drumming, a call to arms rattling through the leaves, a dark summoning. The specters, no longer silent, began to converge, their forms coalescing, swirling like a murky tide, the shadows sharpening around, dragging me toward the heart of this living nightmare. Desperation surged anew. I needed to escape this tightening grip of horror. I ran, darting through branches that seemed to lean into my path, fingers of darkness brushing against my skin, each stroke igniting a searing wave of dread. Just as I thought I'd found a way out, the clearing opened before me into a vast expanse, an ancient stone altar marked with chiseled symbols that thrummed with a pulse all their own. Atop the altar, a single flickering light captured my attention, an orb swirling with colors that flickered like hope trapped in despair. It throbbed with power like the heartbeat of the forest itself, but it was surrounded by writhing tendrils of shadow, sluggishly grasping for the light's brilliance. My heart raced, the locket's warmth surged as I took a step closer. "Take it, let it consume you," the voices whispered, an unholy chorus that tore through the air. "Set us free with your anguish." I hesitated, knowing all too well the cost. But the memories flooded back me, friends, the laughter we'd shared, the warmth that once filled my soul with light. I felt their loss keenly, the agonizing weight crashing into me again, pushing me closer, as if the very shadows were breathing the memories into existence. "Stop!" I cried, feeling my resolve starting to fray, grappling against the pull of darkness. But before I could refocus, the shadows surged, collapsing the space between hope and despair, wrapping around me like a shroud. Then, in the thrumming chaos, I caught a figure emerging from the darkness behind me, a silhouette tainted by malevolence, its presence cutting through the crowd of souls. It moved with stealth and purpose, eyes hidden beneath a mask of twisted branches, and as it stepped forward, a gasp rushed through the congregation of shadows. "Run!" A familiar voice screeched, a fleeting reminder of my ties to the living world, a desperate command that pierced through my stupor, igniting something within me. But as I spun to flee, the shadow surged, a tidal wave rushing to swallow me whole, the chorus rising higher into a shriek of combined agony. "You can't escape your fate." I stood frozen, paralyzed by the horror, and as the shadows closed in, sealing my options, I suddenly saw their faces, recognizable yet unrecognizable. Friends I thought I lost, friends who had become part of this forsaken place. Join us, it's safer here, they murmured, their voices both soothing and seething with an unnatural hunger, and just as I felt the cold tendrils wrap around me, pulling me toward the altar and the light, I took a final, desperate breath. No! I screamed, just as the blackness enveloped me, drowning out the last vestiges of hope. In that moment, as the tendrils tightened, I realized I was not just lost in this forest. I was becoming one with the horror, one with the night, but was it too late to resist? Then, an excruciating, blood-curdling scream erupted from the altar, pulling a new wave of chaos through the shadows, and suddenly I felt the ground shift beneath me, like the very fabric of reality was tearing apart, and then there was silence again, but this time it was a silence laced with unnameable dread, with only the echoes of my friends' voices twisting in the stillness. Welcome home, and I realized with crushing clarity I had just become the final piece of a much darker puzzle. The bitter stench of rot hung thick like fog, wrapping around me as I stood frozen before the altar that pulsed with eerie life. I felt the familiar weight of despair crashing over me, like a tide threatening to drag me beneath the surface, but now was different. The realization that I was not merely lost, but entangled in some grotesque web of fate, sent electric pulses of panic through my veins. The silence was deceptive, pregnant with dark anticipation, reverberating with the remnants of the screams that I assumed were mine. I could still hear the echoing laughter from the forest, an avalanche of manic mirth that drowned in my mind as I staggered backward, my instinct to flee overwhelming the impending grasp of the shadows. That I turned to face the forest again, but it had shifted, the trees now appearing more like sentient gargoyles, their faces twisted in expressions of torment. I caught a glimpse of movement in my periphery, a figure shifting among the trunks, cloaked in blackness. My heart raced as I searched for an escape, but then I noticed, every path was now engulfed in shadow. It was as if they were alive, pulsating, eager to consume me whole. Join us, the whispers rose once more, the voices swelling into a cacophony, weaving their despair into my very being. I stumbled back toward the altar, the tendrils still clawing at my consciousness, snaking around my ankles with a greedy lust for power. From the altar, the orb's light flickered as though responding to my dread. Come closer, it seemed to promise, illuminating the darkness momentarily, revealing the grotesque faces of my lost friends among the shadows, a disturbing gallery of grief and malice. I could barely stand to look at them, yet I felt drawn to the light like a moth. Then, while grappling with my inner turmoil, I stumbled, falling against the cold stone. The orb flared violently, and in an instant, fragments of clarity pierced the fog of despair. A vision tore through my mind, flashes of laughter, of innocence lost, but also of betrayal. They had not just vanished, they had been taken, and I was part of this perverse cycle. The shadows writhed hungrily around me, and to my horror, I sensed their growing impatience. Above the thrumming chaos, a new voice crept through, calm yet menacing. You awaken, but can you bear the truth? My breath caught in my throat. The figure I had glimpsed earlier moved closer, each step deliberate, revealing a face I had never expected to see again. It was Ellie, once tethered in laughter beside me, now a delicate wraith shrouded in darkness, her eyes radiating a fearsome glow, reflecting the very essence of despair. Ellie? I whispered, grappling with disbelief, the shadows dancing with anticipation around her like loyal hounds. What happened to you? This place, it changes you, she murmured, her ethereal voice laced with sadness. We thought we were here for answers, but the darkness only hungers for souls like ours. I was too late in realizing the truth, and now we are bound to it. You must listen, or it will consume you as it did me. Her presence flickered, and just as I reached for her, the shadows recoiled, screeching in protest. You belong with us, Ellie. You cannot escape. They bellowed, wielding anguish as their weapon. Desperation surged like boiling blood through my veins, and I looked between the writhing darkness and Ellie's haunting eyes, pleading for both release and understanding. What must I do? Ellie's expression hardened. You cannot let the orb claim you. If you do, the darkness will fully awaken. But in that same moment, the altar shook violently, as if the orb, aware of my fate, yearned to pull me closer. I felt the tendrils tighten, squeezing the last breath from my lungs. You must go. She cried, her voice breaking as her figure began to diminish. Find the heart of the forest before it finds you. As her last words wrapped around me, the shadows howled, lashing out in a furious gale, clawing at my body, tearing at my will. You can't leave. You belong to the darkness. I turned and ran, fueled by fear that threatened to engulf me. The instant I faltered. With every stride, the sinister whispers grew louder, wrapping around me, tangling thoughts of escape and despair. Yet my determination surged, propelling me forward, despite the myriad paths that twisted like serpents before me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw glimmers of light fleeting, like fractured stars glimpsed between the trees, and I ran toward them, praying they offered salvation. But as I dashed deeper into the suffocating embrace of the forest, the air grew thicker, choking me with the weight of dread. I could feel the presence of something ancient and vengeful awakening all around me, stirring the very soil as I moved forward. The laughter morphed into a terrifying symphony of sorrow, clawing relentlessly at the edges of my sanity, crescendoing to a fever pitch. Then, without warning, the ground beneath me crumbled, falling away as though the roots of the forest were tearing themselves free, clearing a path down a jagged ravine. I flailed, grabbing futilely at the air, unable to find footing as the last vestiges of the forest's hold began to dissolve beneath my weight. With a final, anguished scream, I plunged into the abyss, a haunting echo rising up to taunt me. As darkness enveloped me completely, I could hear one final chorus of despair, the anguished cries of my friends, mingled with a piercing call from the heart of the forest, "Welcome home forever." And as the void closed in, I realized with gut-wrenching clarity this wasn't an end. It was another beginning, one that merged my very essence with the insatiable hunger of the shadows that roamed free. I woke again, heart racing, tears mingling with the dirt on my face. This time, I lay on cold stone, my body shaking but alive. The air smelled of earth and decay, and the faint light of a flickering torch illuminated the cramped chamber around me. My mind was a storm, memories swirling, images of tortured souls pleading for help while I stood rooted in fear. But something in me felt different. I could still hear the whispers, but they were muted, distant, as if I stood behind a veil. I struggled to my feet, the cold stone pressing against me, grounding me. The voices were now mere echoes, and I grasped for clarity amidst the chaos. I rushed to the walls, ancient stone covered in script I couldn't decipher, yet somehow I felt an ancient familiarity with its rhythm, a resonance that called to me, "Find the heart of the forest." Ellie's voice, tinged with despair. "Before it finds you." I drew a deep breath, and with every ounce of courage, I pushed forward. The chamber opened into a narrow corridor, its jagged edges illuminated by an eerie light that flickered from somewhere deep within. The whispers returned, but their tone had shifted. No longer merely a chorus of despair, I felt hints of laughter taunting, mocking me as I trudged deeper into this malevolent domain. Every step felt like a drawn-out trial. Yet with each footfall, I felt strands of my own essence entwining with something dark within the woodlands. At once dizzying, my body pulsed with a shared darkness, feeding off a history of sorrow and prejudice, binding me to this twisted place. I could sense the shadows, instinctively shifting, watching, yearning, as though I were part of their narrative now. Suddenly, a tremor rumbled below, shaking the corridor as I skidded to a halt. The shadows seemed to thicken around me, boiling and writhing with urgency. This way they rasped, brushing against my skin like a chilling wind, alluring yet terrifying. I fought against the pull of their whispers, pushing down my rising dread. "No. I won't become one of you." I screamed, but the words only fueled their mirth, dragging me closer toward the depths of the forest. Then I heard it, an overwhelming cacophony of voices rose above the sinister whispers, drowning them out. My friends, their anguished cries for help evolved into a single desperate plea. "You were chosen. You can't run. You belong to the darkness." Their words echoed in my mind, luring me into a dangerous spiral. Their faces drifted through my mind's eye, panes captured in time, framed within their shadowy existence. I pressed my palms against my ears, willing the memories away, but they were relentless, clawing back into my heart like the shadows that surrounded me, suffocating me in grief. But no. I had to rally my determination. I wouldn't surrender. If I could find the heart of the forest, there had to be a way to end the horror, to free all of us from this sentient cycle of despair. With renewed resolve, I pressed deeper, pushing past the shadows creeping along the walls and spilling into the corridor like smoke. Finally, I reached a wide archway, the light flooding out of it, a pulsing core of luminescence that made the stone vibrate with an unsettling rhythm. That I stepped inside the chamber, my breath hitching. In the center, set against an altar of twisted roots, was a massive glowing orb, alive with a kaleidoscope of colors, but churning like a storm, a malevolent heart poised to consume all that dared approach. The sight both entranced and horrified me. This was its heart, tethered to the very essence of the forest, powerful and rooted in grief. The agony pulsated with the rhythm of the shadows, whispering in chaotic harmony. Then, amidst the swirling lights, I saw her again, the girl from earlier, the one with hollow eyes and haunting beauty. "You came, but it's too late," she whispered, a dagger of anguish cutting through my defiance. "Once you step inside, you'll become one with this darkness." "No!" I screamed, clenching my fists, the weight of her words tightening around my throat. "You can free us. Find her," she implored. I clawed at the surface of my memory, searching me, instincts screaming that this wasn't just a plea, it was a command. Then it hit me. The locket, the same one that bore her image. I had to embrace my fear, connect with the very fabric of this darkness, and uncover the truth buried beneath the turmoil. With a fierce cry, I lunged toward the orb, my fingers stretched wide, seeking that thin connection to the essence of the forest. The sphere pulsed up against my hands like a monstrous heartbeat, sending shockwaves of energy surging through me. I could see the faces of my friends reflected, twisted, grotesque, just as they were intertwined in this tragic tale. "Help us!" they screamed, morphing into shadows that dripped, coiling back into the depths. But then, the energy in the air shifted, the shadows recoiling. I plunged deeper, crying out to each one, grasping the fragments of their spirits. "I will free you!" I shouted, diving into the depths of the darkness, letting it absorb me completely. In that heavy void, memories invaded my mind, echoes of laughter and joy turned twisted, suffused with despair, and yet unyielding. I felt their anguish but clung to the hope of reclaiming their souls from the grip of the forest. I screamed their names, forcing them to remember them. "Sylvesto, remember me." Images surged, illuminating the darkness, the faces of Ellie and my friends against the backdrop of a millennia of shadows, a curse demanding sacrifice, an unending chain that had claimed too many. Misery encased the orb, but my voice, raw and trembling, began to fracture the hold over them. "One last chance," I yelled, fueled by defiance, grasping that unholy connection that tore through the shadows like a knife. "We won't be lost." The orb flickered as the weight of their collective pain surged, a maelstrom of confusion and raw power battling amidst the chaos of forgotten souls. The voices blended, climbing the crescendo. "Find us." They chorused as the light twisted wildly. That I felt the weight of their spirits struggling, fighting against the darkness wrapped around them, clawing to break free. I reached harder, forcing the luminescence of the orb to swell around us. It pulsed like a heartbeat, drawing together the essence of the living and the lost, the promise of salvation within the tempest of despair. With one final breath, I willed the energy to burst forth. "You will not take us. We are not your prisoners." And then everything shattered. The light burst like a scream, piercing through the depths, cascading outward in an explosion of energy that sent rippled shadows flooding through the forest. The howl of the darkness erupted, a piercing shriek reverberating as the forest erupted in chaos. The shadows recoiled, twisting violently, screeching in agony as the orb expelled our very essence back into the forest, severing the bond that had held us captive for so long. And as the darkness bled away, I could see them, friends, freed from their haunting torment, the shadows that once consumed them dissipating like smoke. They stood there, dazed, the light illuminating their features, real, solid, alive. But as I turned to embrace them, a bone-chilling laughter ripped through the air, echoing with a finality that called to me from the shadows. The ground trembled beneath us as the forest reshaped, contorting back into the monstrous form it had known, the laughter intertwining with the darkness that lingered just beyond the glow of the light. "Not finished yet," it taunted, a final warning echoing in my heart. Even as we stood together, reunited for a moment, I felt it. Darkness throbbed with anticipation, waiting for our resolve to bend, for us to surrender once more. Our victory was temporary, but I would not yield. As the shadows closed in, I knew deep within that this was not the end. The battle for souls would rage on, and this forest would forever weave its dark embrace around those lost in its depths. But I was ready. In our darkest moments, we would shine brighter than any shadow could consume. And I would fight back, for if I did nothing else, I would never stop fighting for my friends. "Get ready," I whispered, and together, we braced against the storm approaching in the gloom. Because I now understood what lingered beneath the twisted roots and ancient trees, and though shadows may creep, across time and pain, I would reclaim myself and the lost no matter the cost. And in the dark, I heard it again, slithering through the trees, "This is just the beginning."